Hey guys, Sufit here. I'm back with you to talk about niche. In our first video, we talked about who are you? What's your persona? What's your brand? What's your character in the marketplace? Who are you? And that's a very important part of your niche. But another important part is who are they? Who is in your audience? Who are you talking to? Whom? Yes. To whom are you talking? It's very important that you know that, because if you don't know that, how are you going to find them? And more importantly, how are they going to find you? So we're going to talk about that a little bit today. Let's say, for example, that you are a realtor. And most realtors act either for buyers or for sellers. It's probably more lucrative to act for sellers because you get two kicks at the can, right? Somebody else can sell your listing. You can get a commission that way, or you can sell it, and buyers, agents maybe don't have as many choices. But we're going to talk today maybe more about buyers, realtors. Let's say you do want to specialize in buyers. Which kind of buyer? Who's it going to be? Now, realtors often specialize in the downsizer, right? That was new when it was new. It's not new anymore. But let's talk about some other or they focus on the first-time buyer. Once again, not really very narrow or very new nowadays. Why don't we focus on something, realtors, like women over 50 who are finally feeling liberated and getting a divorce and want to move the heck out of there and want their own place? How about that? How about newcomers to the city or to the country? How about grieving adult children who are selling the childhood home? That is a hard one, a really hard one. And they could use an empathetic realtor who specializes in that, because then they will feel that you understand them. I mean, who knows this? Speedy Muffler knows this. No, Speedy Muffler is not selling mufflers to aggrieved families, but they are selling mufflers to people who need mufflers rather than who need an overall car repair, right? Millennials. So we're back to realtors. Keep up with me, folks. We're back to realtors. So what about millennials? What about millennials who need to get the heck out of their parents' house, right? What about focusing on the parents who want to leave their own home because the millennial won't leave? Millennials living on the couch in the living room. What about them? Maybe they deserve their own realtor. Maybe you could be the realtor for single men who want their own bachelor pad with all the cool James Bond features and screens and whatever. I mean, that would have been cooler in the 50s, but it still could be a thing, right? Because Dollar Shave Club, there's a lot of companies nowadays who are focusing on that demographic, and realtors could too. And you never see that, right? You see first-time home buyers and you see downsizers. Who else? Nobody. Artists. What about artists who want to live in a very artistic place? People are now converting old churches. They are living in old libraries. They are living in bus stations and train stations, and actually buses themselves, not just the stations, or trains themselves, train cars. All sorts of interesting things. What about focusing on that demographic? I saw something very recently in Toronto, a guy who specializes in people who want to live within a 10-minute walk of the TTC. That's the Toronto Transit Commission in obviously it's in Toronto. That's why they called it the Toronto Transit Commission. So realtors. Okay, what about coaches? I met a woman at a coaching conference. There were like 1,000 coaches in the room, but only one woman who said to me what she specializes in. She specializes in coaching aggressive bosses, people who have been told that they are aggressive. Read overly aggressive, right? What about specializing? I had a guy in my LinkedIn group. By the way, I lead a group on LinkedIn, 15,000 entrepreneurs, authors, speakers, coaches, experts, influencers, media. Put a comment in the comment section if you want a clickable link to join that group. And if I like you, maybe I'll let you in. But I met a person at this in this group who specialized in angry doctors. Anger management for doctors, right? That's a specialty. My specialty, entrepreneurial experts, professionals and entrepreneurs who want to get seen, get heard, get noticed, and get known. There are so many niches for coaches. What if you were the coach? What if you were the coach? I know it's not a huge group, for women who fell in love with priests or men who fell in love with priests. I had a client for a while who she had been married and her husband came out, after they had 2 adult children, told her he was gay, and she was a therapist, and she started focusing on coaching people in this position that she was in, people who were blindsided by something like that. Now, she could have just as easily coached the husband in that situation, and maybe she did go on to do that. How do you tell your wife? That could be something interesting. What about, now we're veering into topic, and topic will be the third series video in this series, assuming that I make a third video in this series. Nothing is guaranteed at this point, folks. But you do see that with once you get really narrow in your audience, the topics just become more obvious, and that's kind of the whole point here, right? If you get narrow, in your audience, you get narrow in your topic, people can find you. What about people in love with priests? It could happen, right? What about, did I say that already? I think I might have said that already. What about people who, actually, I'm going to save this for the next. What if you were a courier service? I saw that this is a real thing. I don't know if they're a courier service or what they call themselves, a shipping service, but this company specializes in helping the family, the relatives of people who are incarcerated, right? And this company helps them get packages to their loved ones who are in jail. Now that's a specialty, right? You got your UPS store, you got FedEx, but you do not have companies who specialize in this sensitive area. So that's another niche. What about financial advisors? Financial advisors, I saw a woman who is in her 30s and she's focusing on millennials, not your grandpa's financial advisor. It happens, right? People inherit wealth from their parents and they don't go to that financial advisor because they're not in sync with them. They don't have anything in common with this older generation, and they go to a millennial financial advisor. You could be that millennial financial advisor. Wealth Simple, which is a very successful company here in Canada. They're not financial advisors, it's a financial services company. They appear to be focusing on millennials with great success, I might add. What if you were a financial advisor for athletes, for actors, for musicians, for the arts, for fishermen? You could be a financial advisor or an insurance agent or an accountant, any of those things. For golfers or motorcyclists, right? I mean, if they can sell them expensive Harley Davidson motorcycles, they can also sell them financial services. So just another niche. I experienced. So I'm a singer as well, and I made a CD years ago. And when it came, independent CD, when it came time to package it, to get a CD cover, I went to a graphic artist who specializes in CD covers, and he specializes in the entrepreneurial independent musician. Actually, I don't think he used the word entrepreneurial. He specialized in indie musicians to the extent that he would go to conferences for musicians. He wasn't a musician, he was a graphic artist, but he would go to conferences for musicians, and he would do free consultation. They had 15-minute consultations with all different kinds of mentors in the industry, right? But he did one about CD covers. So when I did my CD back in the day, I actually did consult with him about doing it. I didn't end up going with him, but he was kind of the guy. And I remember watching are they called Junos on television once, which is kind of like the Canadian Grammys. And I saw him sitting in the audience there. So he really immersed himself with his audience. His audience was musicians, right? I have a client who's a graphic artist, and she decided to be the graphic artist for authors. So she changed her name to wemakebooks.ca, right? CA is the Canadian version of .com. So you can do this. You can absolutely do this. I have a client who's a lawyer. So when he came to me, he was a lawyer who did some litigation, wrongful dismissal, estate planning, wills, a bunch of different things, some litigation. And I said, we got to go narrower here. We got to narrow ourselves to a very narrow audience so that they can get a chance to hear about you, right? He ended up writing a book for them. So who did we decide ultimately his audience was? It wasn't just anybody who had any legal issue. He was a lawyer. It wasn't just anybody who had an estate issue. He was an estate lawyer. It wasn't just people who wanted wills. It was people who wanted, in fact, we eliminated the wills for him. It was people who wanted to fight their family in court, estate litigation, right? And not that they wanted to, nobody wants to, right? But we ended up narrowing it even more, not just family, siblings, because think about it, right? Siblings are the ones often fighting over mom and dad's cottage or mom and dad's business or whatever it is. So he is now the expert in the sibling estate fight. Actually, he's a mediator now. So he specializes in mediating sibling estate fights. Shout out to you, Charles Ticker. So you can do this. You can decide whom do you want to serve, right? And make sure it's whom with an M, because nobody wants to, get the grammar wrong when you're talking about this. You can decide whom you want to serve and put it out there in a big way so that when it comes time for magazines and TV shows and radio shows to interview experts, as they did with my client, there was an issue involving a family, siblings who were fighting, so they called my client to be a commentator on national radio, right? This can happen if you narrow your niche on YouTube, if you narrow your niche in your business. We talked about in the first video, like I said, if you haven't seen it, go back and see it. If I knew anything about graphics or how to do all this, I would point up there and you would see the video. But look for it on my videos. I think I'm wearing red. And watch the first in this series, which is about your persona. Who are you? And today we've been talking about who are they? Who is your audience? You get to choose. Now, sometimes they choose you. Sometimes it's not planned. But it makes a lot of sense for you to decide whom you want to serve, and then you'll know what content to put out there and in which ways to serve them, which will be the third video in this series, should I choose to make such a video. This has been Sufit. Stay tuned.